Next, we have Hannah White from Macquarie University, and Hannah will be talking about creaky voice prevalence in Sydney.
Hi, I'm Hannah, and my research is about creaky voice prevalence across different areas of Sydney. This is research that was conducted with my colleagues Josh Penny, Andy Gibson, Anita Sakai, and Felicity Cox. Creaky voice, often called vocal fry, has a reputation of being a characteristic of women's speech. It's often discussed in relation to American celebrities such as Paris Hilton, Britney Spears, and Kim Kardashian. In fact, here's an excerpt of a compilation of creaky voice in Kim Kardashian's speech.
Decade ago, I'm here together right now by him, a Lamborghini. Yeah, went for his birthday for him.
I've ever read. Don't have the middle name one. Well, Google alerts.
Generally, this association between creaky voice and women's speech is negative, as illustrated by these media headlines that use descriptors such as vile and urge women to give it up. But creak is actually a common feature of both men and women's speech, as can be heard in these Australian English speakers whose speech was recorded as part of this research.
We're kind of just like there for no reason.
And well, that's probably my favourite subject because you're picking that for a reason.
And if you're looking for more examples, you'll find plenty in my own speech. When we look at previous research on creaky voice, we see that it is used to convey many different linguistic and social meanings. Many of the social meanings associated with creaky voice are mixed depending on the study. For example, one study found that a female voice with creak was rated as more casual, more educated, and more genuine sounding than a female voice without creak. However, another study found that both males and females were rated as less competent, less educated, less trustworthy, and less hireable when using creaky voice compared to non-creaky voice, but that this negative effect was stronger for female voices. Evidence from New Zealand and London has suggested that prevalence of creaky voice use can vary depending on ethnic background. Sydney is a very multicultural city. The 2021 census showed that nearly 30% of Sydney residents were born overseas, and a little over 30% of people speak a language other than English at home. We wanted to investigate whether creaky voice varied according to community diversity in Sydney. Our participants were 116 teenage speakers who were all born in Australia. They were recorded at their high schools in 5 different areas of Sydney, which are shown here on this map. Although we didn't specifically recruit speakers of different language backgrounds, these areas are highly correlated with different ethnic groups, which is reflected in the linguistic heritage of our participants. For example, the Northern Beaches is the least ethnically diverse area, with 90.5% of speakers in our sample having an English-only background, whereas in Cabramatta, 100% of our speakers had a non-Anglo background, and for 68.2%, this background was Vietnamese. We identified creaky voice in our data using an automatic algorithm which recognizes acoustic characteristics in the speech signal that are associated with creaky voice. We ran statistical models to examine creak prevalence by gender and area. When looking at gender alone, we see a pattern that reflects ideas perpetuated by stereotypes that women have more creak than men. However, when we examine gender and area together, we see that actually there are differences in creak prevalence that go in both directions. The only area where there was no significant difference in creak rate between girls and boys was the near monolingual Northern Beaches area. In Bankstown and Parramatta, girls were significantly creakier than boys, but in Cabramatta and the Inner West, boys were significantly creakier than girls. Overall, these results show that creaky voice is highly prevalent among young speakers in Sydney, both male and female, and it is socially stratified in complex ways. We've shown that there is more to the story than just women creaking more than men, and that creak prevalence varies according to community and gender. In our future work, We're aiming to continue to unpack this complex relationship between gender, community, and voice quality, and I'd also like to research listener attitudes towards creaky voice in Australia. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you so much, Hannah. As someone who's been criticized for using creaky voice, that was very interesting to me. So we have a question from Kita. Did you look at the age of speakers and the amount of creak?
In this study, no, because all of our speakers were aged between 15 and 19, so a very small range. Most of them were in year 10 at school, which is about 15, 16 years old. So no, but it's definitely on the cards for future work.
Thank you. This was a bit related, but did you see creaky voice bias shift with age? But as you said, you only looked at one group of high schoolers, so you wouldn't have been able to discern that. Do we have any other questions? I have a personal question. Are there any results that you found particularly surprising?
I think I'm not particularly surprised. Just impressionistically, I've been researching creak for a number of years now, so I hear it in everyone's voices. But I think the kind of nice key finding that we have is that when you look at the creak just by gender, you get this stereotypical finding, but actually when you unpack that a little bit more, you see that that's not the case, and you need to take more social factors into account when you're researching creaky voice to get a full picture of what's going
on. We have another question from Kita. Kita asks, will you be looking at the amount of creak by age? And in the US, is creak more prevalent in the US than in Australia? I think might be the question.
Okay. So to answer the first question, yes, I would love to look at creak by age, and we do have corpora available that we can look at that. So we have corpora all the way from small kids to adults. So it would be great to get not many people have looked at creak in small children, so it would be really interesting to do that. And then I'm not sure about the second question in terms of comparing directly the Australian data with the American data, because these studies are done in quite different ways. So that's one of the tricky things about research on voice quality, getting a kind of consistent methodology. So it would be really interesting to kind of see if this study is comparable with other studies in the US. But we were finding that our speakers were creaking like quite a lot. So about 20% of the time was kind of an average. So or 15 to 20%. So that's quite a decent amount.
Thank you. And then Kita clarified that they meant younger speakers in the US employ creak more than older speakers. But we will find out soon, hopefully.
Yeah. Future work. Watch the space.
And then the last question from Avery, are there any cultural or language communities where you found significantly more or less creaky voice?
So this is also something that we want to delve kind of further into. So this is really just a kind of surface level look, but there's definitely like we imagine there are things going on in these communities that are contributing to some speakers creaking more than others. So whether that's to do with heritage language, having an influence on voice quality, or Whether it's something to do with gender roles in different communities, we're not sure yet, but it's definitely something that we are interested in researching further.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I will certainly stay tuned to your findings on that.
Thank you.
So we will move on to our next presenter. Gia Oswafata